I stood over my son's body on the cold metal table. The official police report said he died in a violent shootout. It claimed he was a heroin dealer who opened fire on 5 officers. But I saw the truth etched into his skin. There were powder burns on his forehead. There were deep, purple bruises on his wrists. Kyle didn't die fighting. He was handcuffed and executed at point-blank range. Those 5 cops thought they were just cleaning up a mess. They didn't know they just declared war on a Navy SEAL. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. The rain hammered against my windshield, but I couldn't hear it. All I could hear was the voice on the phone from 20 minutes ago. Mr. Grant? This is Sergeant Dominic from the 4th Precinct. You need to come down here. It's about your son, Kyle. That tone. It wasn't the tone of a man calling to say my son had been in an accident. It was the tone of a man calling to tell me my son was a criminal. I parked at the county hospital, right next to the morgue entrance. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I forced myself to breathe. In, out. For seconds hold. The tactical breathing I learned 20 years ago in Coronado. It was the only thing keeping me from screaming. Kyle was 19. He was a sophomore in college. He played baseball. He wanted to be an architect. He didn't deal drugs. I stepped out into the rain and walked through the sliding glass doors. A man was waiting for me. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a uniform that was a little too tight. His badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Mr. Grant, he asked. Where is he? My voice sounded like gravel. I'm Sergeant Dominic. I was the officer in charge, he said. He didn't offer a hand. He stood with his thumbs hooked in his belt, his posture defensive. Look, this is a hard situation. We found 2 kilos of heroin in the trunk of his car. He was moving weight, Mr. Grant. I stared at him. My son plays shortstop. He studies engineering. He doesn't move weight. Dominic let out a sigh, a fake sound of sympathy. Parents never know, do they? We pulled him over for a broken taillight. He panicked. He reached for a weapon. My guys, they had no choice. He fired first. He had a gun? A 9mm, unregistered. Dominic recited perfectly. Like a script. I want to see him. Dominic led me into the cold room. The smell of antiseptic filled my nose. It was the smell of death. I knew it well from Iraq and Afghanistan. The medical examiner pulled back the sheet. And there he was. Kyle. He looked so young. His face was pale, almost gray. There was a small hole in the center of his forehead. A kill shot. Professional. I leaned in close. Don't touch the body, Dominic warned. I ignored him. I looked at Kyle's wrists. There were dark, distinct bands of bruising. The skin was raw. He was handcuffed, I said softly. What? Dominic stepped closer. These marks. I pointed without touching. He was restrained. Why would you handcuff a dead man? Or did you handcuff him before you shot him? Dominic's jaw tightened. The bruising occurred during the struggle. Before he pulled the gun. He fought us, Grant. You said he fired first. I turned to face him. I let 20 years of combat experience flow into my eyes. I looked at him not as a grieving father, but as a predator. If he was fighting you physically, how did he manage to pull a gun and fire? Dominic's eyes narrowed. He realized he had made a mistake. It happened fast. Look, I know you're hurting, but your son was a criminal. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you can move on. Move on, I repeated. Yeah, we're closing the case. Justified use of force. I looked back at Kyle one last time. I memorized the powder burns on his forehead. That meant the gun was fired from less than 2 feet away. I need his personal effects, I said. His phone. The car. The car is evidence, Dominic said quickly. The phone too. It's all being processed. I walked out of that room. I knew if I looked at Dominic for one more second, I would snap his neck right there. And I couldn't do that. Not yet. He said my guys. That meant there were more of them. Driving home was the hardest thing I have ever done. I had to go tell Eliza. She was waiting on the porch. She saw my truck pull in, and she knew. She saw my face, and she collapsed. I caught her before she hit the wet concrete. We sat there in the rain, my arms around her, her screams echoing through the quiet neighborhood. They said he had drugs. I whispered to her later, inside the house. They said he had a gun. Kyle, she looked at me, her eyes red. Grant, he was afraid of spiders. He didn't have a gun. You know he didn't. I know, I said. I waited until Eliza finally fell asleep from exhaustion. It was 3 a.m. The house was silent. I went down to the basement. I moved the old workbench aside and pulled up the loose floorboard in the corner. Beneath it was a heavy, black Pelican case. I hadn't opened it in 8 years. I popped the latches. Click, click. Inside was my past. ASIG Sauer P226. A tactical knife. A few stacks of cash. Dominic thought he had covered his tracks. He thought he could intimidate me with a badge. But he made one critical error. He didn't check who Kyle's father was. I put the gun in my waistband and grabbed my keys. I needed to see the car. Dominic said it was evidence, which meant it was at the impound lot. I drove through the dark streets. I parked 3 blocks away from the city impound and moved through the shadows. I reached the chain-link fence and cut through it in 10 seconds. I found Kyle's sedan in the back row, taped off with yellow police tape. I shone my small tactical light through the window. The interior was torn apart. The seats were slashed. They had been looking for something. But then I saw it. On the driver's side door panel, there were 3 bullet holes. I traced the angle with my finger. The shots came from outside the car, going in. But the glass was shattered inward. If Kyle had opened the door to shoot, the glass would have been down or broken differently. I opened the door carefully. I looked at the floor mat. There, wedged deep under the brake pedal, was something the investigators had missed. It was a small, silver casing. I picked it up with a handkerchief. It wasn't a 9mm casing. It was a .40 caliber, the standard issue round for the city police department. And it was inside the car, under the pedal, which meant they opened the door, leaned in, and shot him while he was sitting there. My heart slowed down. The grief was still there, but now it had a direction. As I turned to leave, headlights swept across the lot. A patrol car pulled up to the gate. I crouched behind Kyle's car. 2 men got out. I recognized the voices immediately. One was Dominic. You sure you cleaned it all out? Dominic asked. Yes, Sarge. I tossed the whole car. There's nothing left, another voice said. Young. Nervous. That must be the rookie. Better be, Dominic growled. Because the dad, he's got dead eyes. He knows something. If there is a single scrap of evidence left in this car, we are exposed. We should have just arrested the kid, Sarge, the younger voice said. Killing him, it was too much. He saw the drop. Evan. Dominic snapped. He saw the face. We didn't have a choice. Now shut up and help me pour the gasoline. We're torching the car tonight. Electrical fire. An accident. I froze. They were going to burn the evidence. Right now? And I was standing right in the middle of it. The sharp smell of gasoline filled the night air. It burned my nose, overpowering the scent of rain and wet pavement. I was crouched behind the rear bumper of my son's car, less than 5 feet away from the men who killed him. Hurry up, Dominic hissed. Soak the back seat. I heard the liquid splashing against the upholstery. My hand drifted to the grip of the pistol in my waistband. I could take them. 2 targets. Close range. I had the element of surprise. I could put 2 rounds in Dominic's chest and 1 in Evan's head before the gas can even hit the ground. But I froze. If I killed them now, here, in a police impound lot, I would be the villain. The narrative would be simple. Grieving, unhinged father murders 2 heroes in the line of duty. Kyle's name would never be cleared. The truth would die with them. I needed them to speak before they died. It's done, Evan's voice shook. Light it, Dominic ordered. I heard the distinctive click of a Zippo lighter. I moved. Not toward them, but away. I stayed low, keeping the bulk of the car between me and their line of sight. I moved like a ghost, rolling my feet heel to toe to silence my boots against the gravel. I slipped into the shadows of a tow truck 2 rows over just as a whoosh of air sucked the oxygen out of the lot. An orange glow erupted, lighting up the night. The heat hit my face instantly. "Let's go," Dominic said. "Don't look back." I watched them scramble into their patrol car and speed off, tires spinning on the wet asphalt. I stayed in the shadows, watching my son's car, the last piece of physical evidence, turn into a skeleton of twisted metal and ash. They thought they had destroyed the truth, but I slipped my hand into my pocket and felt the cold brass of the .40 caliber casing. They missed one thing, and that one thing was enough to start a war. The next 3 days were a blur of gray skies and black suits. We buried Kyle on a Tuesday. The service was small. Most of his college friends were too scared to come. Their parents told them to stay away from the drug dealer's funeral. That's what the news was calling him now. The police chief had gone on TV the night before, showing a photo of the heroin they claimed to have found. He called Kyle a danger to the community. I stood by the grave, holding Eliza's hand. She was barely standing. She looked like she had aged 10 years in a week. Her skin was pale, her eyes hollow. She wasn't crying anymore. She was just empty. "Why aren't they here, Grant?" she whispered, looking around the empty cemetery. "Where are our friends?" "People are scared, Elle," I said softly. "Lies travel faster than the truth. It's not fair." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "He was a good boy." "I know." As the priest finished the service, I saw a black sedan pull up to the curb 100 yards away. It wasn't a patrol car, but it had that government tint. Dominic stepped out. He was wearing a dress uniform, white gloves, the whole show. He was followed by another man I hadn't seen before, a massive guy with a shaved head and a neck as thick as a tree trunk. That had to be Ryder. I had seen his name on the police report. They walked toward the grave. The audacity made my blood boil. It was a power move. They were coming to piss on the grave. "Grant," Eliza squeezed my hand. "Is that them?" "Stay behind me," I said. Dominic stopped 5 feet away. He took off his hat and held it to his chest. He looked solemn, respectful. It was a perfect performance. "Mr. Grant." "Mrs. Grant," Dominic said, his voice smooth. "I wanted to pay my respects. Despite the circumstances, it is always a tragedy when a young life is lost." Eliza trembled against me. "Get out of here," she whispered. Dominic ignored her. He looked at me. His eyes were cold, dead sharks swimming in a blue sea. "We heard about the fire at the impound lot. Terrible shame. The investigation is officially closed now. Evidence destroyed. Case closed." He was mocking me. He was telling me he won. "Accidents happen," Ryder grunted. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together. He was staring at Eliza, not me. It was a look of intimidation. I stepped forward, breaking the distance. I invaded Dominic's personal space. I was an inch taller than him, and I didn't back down. "You have a nice watch, Sergeant," I said. Dominic blinked, surprised by the comment. He glanced down at his wrist. "A gold Rolex Submariner. Gift from an uncle," he lied. "That's a $40,000 watch," I said, keeping my voice low so Eliza wouldn't hear the menace in it. "On a sergeant's salary? That's impressive budgeting. Or maybe you just have a very generous side business." Dominic's face hardened. The mask slipped for a second. "Careful, Grant. Grief makes people say stupid things. Things that can get them hurt. You have a lovely wife. You wouldn't want her to undergo any more stress, would you? The city can be a dangerous place." It was a direct threat. He was using Eliza as leverage. I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had just confirmed his target coordinates. "Thank you for coming," I said. "Now get off my son's grass." Dominic stared at me for a long second, trying to find fear in my eyes. He didn't find any. He put his hat back on. "Let's go, Ryder." They walked back to the sedan. I watched them drive away. "What did he say to you?" Eliza asked, wiping a fresh tear from her cheek. "Nothing that matters," I lied. "Let's go home." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the basement, the only light coming from a single desk lamp. I had cleared off the wall above my workbench. I pinned up the 5 names I knew. Dominic, the leader. Arrogant. Greedy. Evan, the rookie. The weak link. Nervous. Ryder. The muscle. Violent. Stupid. Ian. Unknown role yet. Julian. Unknown role yet. I placed the .40 caliber casing in the center of the desk. I couldn't go to the FBI. If Dominic was moving enough drugs to buy a Rolex, he had protection. He likely had judges or politicians on the payroll. If I went to the feds, the report would conveniently disappear, and Eliza would end up in a car accident a week later. No, the system was broken. I had to fix it manually. I opened my laptop. I wasn't a hacker, but I knew surveillance. I knew how to track patterns. I pulled up the public social media profiles of the officers. Most were locked down, but Evans wasn't. He was young, sloppy. He had posted a photo of a new truck 2 days ago. #new ride, #blessed. A rookie cop buying a $60,000 truck 3 days after stealing a heroin shipment. They weren't even trying to hide it. They felt untouchable. I grabbed my gear bag. I needed to see where Evan went when he was off duty. I needed to isolate him. I kissed Eliza on the forehead while she slept. She was sedated with sleeping pills the doctor gave her. She wouldn't wake up until morning. I drove to the address listed on Evan's registration. I had pulled it from a public database using a burner account. He lived in an apartment complex on the north side. I parked down the street and waited. At 0200 hours, Evan came out. He wasn't in uniform. He was wearing a hoodie, looking around nervously. He got into his new truck. I followed him. He didn't go to the precinct. He drove out toward the industrial district, past the old textile mills. He pulled into the parking lot of a rundown warehouse that had been converted into a dive bar called The Trap. It was fitting. I watched from my car. 10 minutes later, another car pulled up. It was Ryder. They stood outside, smoking. I rolled down my window just a crack. I had a parabolic microphone, a leftover toy from my contracting days in the Middle East. I pointed the dish at them. The audio hissed in my earpiece, then cleared. "I don't like it, Ryder," Evan was saying. "The dad. He knows. Did you see his eyes at the cemetery? He's not just some suburban dad." "Shut up, kid," Ryder spat. Dominic handled him. "He's scared. He knows if he talks, the wife gets it. We're safe. Just enjoy the money." "But the shipment," Evan whispered. "The cartel is expecting the full load. We shorted them to sell on the side. If they find out." "They won't," Ryder laughed. "We blamed it on the dead kid. We told the contact that Kyle stole a kilo. It's the perfect cover." My hand tightened on the steering wheel. They hadn't just killed Kyle to cover their tracks. They used his death as an excuse to steal from a cartel. They pinned their own theft on my son's memory. I lowered the microphone. I had heard enough. Evan was the key. He was scared of me. He was scared of the cartel. He was a cracking dam, and I was about to be the sledgehammer. I watched Ryder leave. Evan stayed behind, finishing his cigarette. He was alone. I opened my car door. I didn't bring a gun this time. I didn't need one. Fear was a much stronger weapon than lead. I walked out of the shadows, straight toward him. Evan dropped his cigarette. The embers sparked on the wet asphalt as he reached for his hip. It was a reflex, the muscle memory of a cop used to being the one in control. But he was slow. He was clumsy. He was reaching for a weapon because he was terrified, not because he was ready to fight. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I just covered the distance between us in 3 long, silent strides. Before his hand could even touch the grip of his service weapon, I had him. I grabbed his wrist with my left hand, twisting it away from his body until I heard the tendons pop. With my right hand, I slammed his chest, driving him back against the door of his shiny new truck. The impact knocked the wind out of him. He gasped, his eyes wide, staring into mine. "Don't," I whispered. My voice was calm. It was the voice of a man explaining the weather, not a man assaulting a police officer. "If you pull that gun, I will feed it to you." Evan froze. He recognized me. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking sick and pale under the flickering parking lot light. "Grant," he choked out. "Mr. Grant, you can't be here. You're assaulting an officer. I can call it in." "I can't call it in," I challenged him, leaning closer. I could smell the stale beer on his breath. Go ahead. Call Dominic. Tell him I'm here. Tell him I heard you talking about the cartel. Tell him I know you shorted the shipment. Evan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The threat of arrest died in his throat. He realized I wasn't just a grieving father looking for closure. I was a witness to his felony. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered, his eyes darting to the side, looking for an exit. Look at me, I commanded. I tightened my grip on his wrist. My son didn't steal your drugs. You stole them, and you killed him to hide the theft. You made my boy the scapegoat for your greed. It wasn't me. Evan blurted out. Tears were forming in his eyes now. He was weak. He was the perfect weak link. I didn't shoot him. I just drove the car. It was Dominic. It was Ryder. They made me do it. But you watched, I said coldly. You watched them execute a 19-year-old boy. You watched them plant the gun. And you took your cut of the money to buy this truck. I released his wrist and stepped back, giving him space. It was a calculated risk. I wanted to see what he would do. Evan rubbed his wrist, breathing heavily. He looked at his gun, then at me. He didn't draw it. He knew he couldn't win. What do you want? He whispered. Money? I can give you money. I have cash. I don't want your blood money, I said. I want the truth. And you're going to give it to me. I can't. He shook his head violently. Dominic will kill me. You don't know him. He's crazy. And the people we deal with, the cartel, they'll skin me alive. They will, I agreed. If they find out you stole from them. Imagine what happens if I make an anonymous call to your cartel contacts. Imagine if I tell them Officer Evan is the one who skimmed the product. Evan looked like he was going to vomit. He was trapped between a Navy SEAL and a drug cartel. It was a hell of his own making. I'm going to ask you one question, I said. Where is the rest of the shipment? You said you shorted them. Where's the stash? Evan hesitated. I took one step forward, and he flinched. The cabin, he screamed. Dominic has a cabin. Up near the lake. Lakeview Drive. It's in the floorboards. That's where we keep the emergency fund and the extra product. Just don't tell them. Please. I memorized the location. Lakeview Drive. Go home, Evan, I said. And if you tell Dominic we had this conversation, I won't call the cartel. I'll come back here. And next time, I won't be this polite. I turned and walked away into the darkness. I didn't look back. I heard Evan scrambling into his truck, the engine roaring as he sped away. He was terrified. Paranoia would set in tonight. He would look at Dominic and wonder if the sergeant knew. He would look at Ryder and wonder if he was next. I had planted the seed of chaos. Now I just had to water it. The next morning, I drove out to Lakeview Drive. It was a secluded area, thick with pine trees and winding dirt roads. Perfect for hiding secrets. I parked my truck a mile away and hiked in through the woods. I was wearing my old camouflage hunting gear. I blended in with the foliage, moving slowly, stopping every few yards to listen. I found the cabin. It was small, wooden, with a wraparound porch. There was a black SUV parked out front. Dominic's SUV. I pulled out my binoculars. Through the front window, I could see movement. Dominic was there, and so was Ryder. They were arguing. I crept closer, moving to the edge of the tree line, about 50 yards from the house. I couldn't hear them through the glass, but their body language was clear. Dominic was pacing. Ryder was slamming his hand on the table. Something was wrong in their paradise. Then, a third car pulled up. It was a silver sedan. A man in a sharp, gray suit stepped out. He didn't look like a cop. He looked like a lawyer or a banker. He carried a briefcase. Dominic came out to the porch to greet him. They shook hands, but it wasn't friendly. It was stiff. Who is the suit? I whispered to myself. I needed to get closer. I needed audio. I waited until they went inside. I crawled on my stomach through the tall grass, inching my way toward the crawl space under the porch. The ground was wet and cold, soaking through my clothes, but I didn't feel it. I was in the zone. I reached the lattice skirting of the porch and used my knife to silently pry a section loose. I slipped underneath the cabin. Above me, I could hear their footsteps thumping on the wooden floorboards. I could hear their voices clearly now. The payment is light, Dominic, the man in the suit said. His voice was nasally, irritated. The judge is not happy. We provide you with protection, we scrub the legal files, and you provide the tithe. That is the arrangement. The judge, I thought. So it goes that high. We had overhead. Dominic's voice rumbled. The situation with the kid. We had to pay off the coroner to look the other way on the bruising. We had to grease the evidence locker guy. It costs money to cover a murder, Julian. That was your mess. The suit, Julian snapped. You were sloppy. The judge doesn't pay for your incompetence. He wants the full $50,000 by Friday. Or he pulls the protection. And if he pulls the protection, internal affairs will eat you alive. Don't threaten me, Julian, Dominic growled. I know where the judge sleeps. We're in this together. Are we? Julian laughed. You're a street dog, Dominic. The judge is the hand that feeds you. Don't bite it. Friday, or you're on your own. I heard the scraping of a chair, then footsteps leaving. The front door opened and closed. The silver sedan drove away. I lay there in the dirt, my heart pounding. This was bigger than 5 dirty cops. This was a network. A judge. A coroner. A system designed to protect the guilty and bury the innocent. What do we do, boss? Ryder asked from above. We squeeze, Dominic said. We need cash fast. Tell Evan to push the street dealers. Hard. I don't care who gets hurt. We need that money by Friday. Evan is acting weird, Ryder noted. He's jumping at shadows. Think he's cracking. There was a long silence. If he cracks, Dominic said, his voice dropping to a whisper that chilled my blood, we handle him. Like we handled the Grant kid. No loose ends. I had heard enough. Evan was a liability to them. They were already planning to take him out if he became a problem. I slowly crawled back out from under the porch. I retraced my path through the woods, back to my truck. I sat in the driver's seat and stared at the steering wheel. I had a choice. I could let them kill Evan. It would save me the trouble. But if Evan died, I lost my best source of information. I lost my witness. And more importantly, I wanted to be the one to decide their fate. Not Dominic. I started the engine. It was time to pay Evan another visit. But this time, I wasn't going to threaten him. I was going to break him completely. I was going to use him to set the trap. I drove back toward the city. The sun was setting, turning the sky a bruised purple. It was the color of my son's wrists. The hunt was on. I didn't knock. I didn't have to. Evan's apartment door had a cheap deadbolt that surrendered to a tension wrench in under 15 seconds. The apartment was a mess. Clothes were scattered everywhere. An open suitcase sat on the couch, half filled. Evan was panic packing. He was running. I stepped inside and closed the door softly. The click of the latch was the loudest sound in the room. Evan spun around, dropping a stack of cash. He fumbled for the gun on the coffee table, but I was already there. I kicked the table, sending the weapon skittering across the floor into the kitchen. Going somewhere? I asked. Evan backed up until he hit the wall. He was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. Please, he begged. I'm leaving. I'm getting out of town. You'll never see me again. You're right, I said. I won't. I pulled out my phone and hit play on the recording I had made under the cabin. Dominic's voice filled the small room, clear and cold. If he cracks, we handle him. Like we handled the Grant kid. No loose ends. Evan's face went white. He slid down the wall, collapsing onto the floor. The fight drained out of him instantly. He realized that even if he ran, Dominic would find him. He was a dead man walking. They're going to kill me, Evan whispered. They are, I confirmed. Tonight. Tomorrow. Whenever they find you. You're a liability, Evan. And Dominic doesn't leave loose ends. I pulled a chair over and sat in front of him. I wasn't there to comfort him. I was there to collect a debt. You have one chance to do something right in your miserable life, I said. I set my phone on the table, camera lens facing him. Tell the truth. On video. Tell me exactly how my son died. Tell me who gave the order. If I do, will you let me go? He asked, a flicker of hope in his eyes. I looked at him. I thought about Kyle. I thought about the bruises on his wrists. I thought about the fear my son must have felt in those final seconds while Evan stood by and watched. "Start talking," I said, avoiding the question. Evan took a breath. He looked into the lens. It was a routine stop at first, but we saw the bag in the back. Cash. A lot of it. It wasn't Kyle's. We found out later he had just cashed a scholarship check and sold his old car. He had $6,000 in cash. "Go on," I said. Dominic got greedy. He said we could take it. Said no one would believe a kid over a sergeant. But Kyle, he fought back. He said he was calling the station. He started dialing. Evan began to sob. Dominic panicked. He nodded at Ryder. Ryder held the kid down. Dominic put the gun to his head. He said, "This is how we learn." And he pulled the trigger. My knuckles turned white. It wasn't a drug deal gone wrong. It was a robbery. A robbery over $6,000. My son died for the price of a used Honda. And the heroin? I asked. Planted. Evan wept. We keep a stash for busts like that. To justify the shooting. We handcuffed him after. To make sure he didn't move while we staged the scene. Then we took the handcuffs off before the CSI got there. But we left the marks. Good, I said. I stopped the recording. I uploaded the video to an encrypted cloud server instantly. The truth was safe. I stood up. Okay. Evan wiped his face. I told you. Now let me go. I'll disappear. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small plastic bag. Inside was a syringe and a vial of high-grade heroin, the same brand they claimed Kyle was selling. I had acquired it from a dealer 2 streets over on my way here. "You're not going anywhere, Evan," I said. Evan's eyes widened. "You said," I said I wanted the truth. "I got it." I moved toward him. "You watched my son die. You watched them plant the drugs. You took a cut of the money. You were just as guilty as the man who pulled the trigger." "No. Grant, please." He tried to scramble away, but I was on him. I didn't strike him. I used a chokehold, cutting off the blood flow to his brain. It took 6 seconds for him to go limp. He wasn't dead, just unconscious. I staged the scene perfectly. I placed him on the couch. I prepared the needle. I injected the heroin into his arm, between his toes to make it look like he was hiding his habit. It was a lethal dose. I took the gun from the kitchen and wiped my prints, then pressed his fingers against it and placed it on the floor near his hand. Then, I took the remaining heroin and scattered it on the table next to a bottle of whiskey. When the police found him, it would look like the guilt got to him. The rookie cop, stressed out, relapsed and overdosed. Dominic would think Evan cracked under the pressure and accidentally killed himself. It would drive Dominic crazy wondering if Evan talked to anyone before he died. I looked at Evan one last time. His breathing was slowing down. Shallow. Rattling. "Rest in peace," I said, though I didn't mean it. I walked out of the apartment and locked the door behind me. One down. For to go? The morning news confirmed it. Tragedy in the 4th precinct. Rookie officer Evan Miller was found dead in his apartment last night. Preliminary reports suggest an accidental overdose. Police Chief Morgan stated that the stress of the job often takes a toll on our young heroes. I turned off the TV. Dominic had bought the lie. He thought Evan had cracked under the guilt and relapsed. He would be relieved. He thought his loose end had tied itself up. He would be celebrating tonight, thinking the danger was over. But I was just getting started. However, one thing Evan said was gnawing at me. He saw the drop. He saw the face. Why was Kyle there? Why was my son, an engineering student who spent his weekends studying or playing baseball, at a remote industrial park at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday? It didn't make sense. Kyle was smart. He wouldn't just stumble into a drug deal. I went into Kyle's bedroom. It was exactly as he left it. His baseball glove on the dresser. His textbooks stacked on the desk. It smelled like his cologne and old paper. It was a sanctuary of a life cut short. I sat at his desk. I needed to know what Kyle was doing that night. The police had taken his phone and his laptop as evidence. I knew I'd never see those again. They probably drilled holes in the hard drives the second they got them. But Kyle was an engineer. He built his own gaming PC. He was paranoid about losing his data for school projects. I looked at the massive computer tower sitting under his desk. The cops had taken the laptop, but they left the desktop. They probably thought it was just a toy. I powered it up. Locked. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. I tried his mom's birthday. Incorrect. I closed my eyes and thought about him. What mattered to him? I typed in Semper Fi. Access granted. My chest tightened. He used the Marine Corps motto. He looked up to me. He wanted to be like me. I started digging through his files. School papers, blueprints, games. Nothing unusual. Then I found a hidden folder deep in the system directory, labeled Project Blue. I opened it. It wasn't engineering schematics. It was a log of audio recordings and screenshots of text messages. I clicked on the first audio file. It was dated 2 months ago. This is Kyle Grant. Recording entry 1. I was approached on campus today. A man named Nathaniel. He said he knows my dad. He says he works for internal affairs. He says there are dirty cops in the 4th precinct and they need someone on the inside to spot them. Someone young who won't look like a Fed. My blood turned to ice. Nathaniel. Nathaniel wasn't just a name. Nathaniel was my spotter in Afghanistan. We served 2 tours together. I saved his life in Kandahar. He dragged me out of a burning Humvee in Fallujah. He was the only man outside of my family I trusted. He was now a high-ranking agent in internal affairs. I clicked the next file. I told Nathaniel I'm scared. These guys are dangerous. Dominic stares at me when I drive past the station. But Nathaniel said I have to do this. He said it's my duty. He said, make your dad proud. I slammed my fist onto the desk. The wood cracked. Nathaniel used me. He used my legacy to manipulate my son into playing spy against dangerous killers. I opened the chat logs. The last conversation was dated the night Kyle died. Kyle, 1:45 a.m., they're changing the location. They're going to the shipyard. I think they made me. Dominic is looking at me weird. I'm pulling out. Handler_Titan, Nathaniel negative. Stay in position. We need photos of the transfer. Do not abort. Kyle, 1:48 a.m. Nathaniel, please. They have guns drawn. I'm scared. Handler_Titan, Nathaniel hold the line, kid. We are 10 minutes out. Just get the proof. That was the last message. There was no backup. Nathaniel wasn't 10 minutes out. If he was, he would have saved him. Or at least arrested them afterwards. Nathaniel sent my son into a slaughterhouse to get a promotion. And when Kyle got caught, Nathaniel let him die to protect his own operation. He burned the asset to save the mission. And he never called me. He never told me. He let me believe my son was a drug dealer just like the rest of them. The grief in my chest vanished. It was replaced by a cold, black hatred that was far deeper than what I felt for Dominic. Dominic was a criminal. He was a wolf acting like a wolf. But Nathaniel? He was a brother. He was family. And he was the reason my son was dead. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text message. Sender. Nathaniel Grant, I just heard about Evan Miller. And the fire at the impound. Stay safe, brother. Don't do anything stupid. Let the system handle it. I'm looking into it. I stared at the screen. The audacity. I didn't reply. I put the phone down. I wasn't just hunting 5 dirty cops anymore. I was hunting the entire system. Dominic pulled the trigger, but Nathaniel loaded the gun. I grabbed a flash drive and copied the Project Blue folder. This was my insurance. I stood up. The mission had changed. I wasn't just going to kill Dominic and his crew. I was going to tear down the world that allowed them to exist. But first, I needed to thin the herd. I looked at my wall of targets. Dominic, Ryder, Ian, Julian. Evan was crossed out. It was time for Ian, the quiet one, the one who handled the money logs. I grabbed my sniper rifle from the safe. Tonight, the wolf pack loses another member. The death of Evan was the rock thrown into the pond. Now, I needed to watch the ripples. I spent the morning cleaning my rifle. It was a Chaytak M200 intervention, a weapon designed for one thing: long-range dominance. It was heavy, precise, and unforgiving. As I wiped the bolt with oil, I thought about Nathaniel. He had betrayed me. He had betrayed Kyle. But he was a Fed, and Feds were careful. I couldn't touch him yet. If I killed an IA agent now, the heat would be too much. I needed to finish the immediate threat first. I needed to isolate Dominic. And the best way to do that was to take away his wallet. Officer Ian. Ian was the group's accountant. He was the one who washed the money, cooked the books, and handled the payouts. He was the quiet professional. If Evan was the weak link, Ian was the vault. I knew from my surveillance that Ian was paranoid. With Evan dead, Ian would be moving the cash. He wouldn't trust the current hiding spots. He would want to consolidate the funds to make a run for it if things got hot. I drove to a ridge overlooking an old, defunct cement factory on the outskirts of the city. My intel, gathered from tracking Ian's GPS on his personal vehicle, told me this was his safe zone. I hiked 2 miles through the brush to get to my perch. I set up in a dense thicket of scrub oak, draping a ghillie net over my position. I was invisible. I checked the wind. 5 miles per hour, full value from the west. Range, 840 yards. I dialed in the scope. At 1,400 hours, Ian's SUV rolled into the factory yard. He got out. He was carrying 2 large duffel bags. He looked nervous. He kept checking his phone. He wasn't meeting Dominic. He was skimming. I pulled out a burner phone. I had cloned Dominic's number earlier using a brute force software on the laptop. I couldn't listen to his calls, but I could send a message that looked like it came from him. I typed a message to Ian. I know what you're doing. Don't move the money. Through the scope, I watched Ian read the text. He froze. He looked around wildly. He didn't text back. Instead, he threw the bags into the trunk of a different car, a rusted sedan parked in the lot. He was switching vehicles. He was stealing the collective pot. Perfect. Now I needed to send a message to Dominic. I switched the spoofing app to display an unknown number and texted Dominic's real phone. Ian is cutting a deal with internal affairs. He's at the cement factory with the cash. He's leaving you dry. I set the phone down. The trap was set. 10 minutes later, I saw dust rising in the distance. A black cruiser was tearing down the dirt road. Dominic. And he brought Ryder. They screeched into the lot, blocking the exit. Ian was just getting into the driver's seat of the rusted sedan. He saw them and panicked. He locked the doors. Dominic jumped out of his cruiser, gun drawn. He was screaming something, but at this distance, I couldn't hear it. I could see the rage in his body language. He thought Ian was ratting him out to the feds, to Nathaniel. Ryder circled the car, smashing the window with the butt of his shotgun. He dragged Ian out onto the gravel. They were beating him. Dominic was pistol whipping him, screaming about loyalty. I settled my cheek against the stock of the rifle. I didn't want them to kill Ian. If they killed him, they would take the money and leave. They would feel justified. I needed them to be terrified. I shifted the crosshairs. I wasn't aiming for Dominic. Not yet. I aimed for Ian. He was on his knees, blood pouring from his nose, begging Dominic. Dominic had his gun pointed at Ian's head, hesitating. He was shouting, asking where the wire was. I exhaled. The world narrowed down to a single point. Crack. The sound of the shot wouldn't reach them for 2 seconds. But the bullet arrived instantly. It struck Ian in the center of the chest. The impact threw him backward violently, as if he had been kicked by a mule. Dominic and Ryder flinched, ducking behind the car. They didn't know where the shot came from. They looked around wildly. Sniper. I saw Ryder mouth the word. They thought it was the cartel. Or maybe a federal tactical team. Dominic grabbed the duffel bags of money from the trunk. He didn't even check on Ian. He left his man bleeding out in the dust. Self-preservation was the only law they followed. They scrambled back into their cruiser. Ryder fired a few blind shots into the hills with his shotgun, useless at this range. They peeled out, tires spinning, leaving a cloud of dust and a dead partner behind. I watched through the scope until their car disappeared. Ian was motionless. The shot was clean. I dismantled my rifle slowly. 2 down, 3 to go. But more importantly, I had broken their trust. Dominic now believed Ian was a snitch who got taken out by a third party. He didn't know who was hunting them. Was it the cartel? Was it the feds? The uncertainty would make them sloppy. I packed my gear and hiked back to my truck. My phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Gangland violence suspected in execution of off-duty officer. The narrative was holding. But as I drove back toward the city, I realized I had a problem. Ryder was the muscle. He was simple-minded, violent, and fiercely loyal to Dominic. But he was also observant in a primal way. He had seen me at the funeral. He had seen the way I looked at them. If Dominic was the brain, Ryder was the fist. And now that they were cornered, the fist was going to start swinging. I pulled into my driveway an hour later. The house was dark. Eliza was staying at her sister's for a few days. I had insisted on it, telling her I needed time alone to process the grief. It was a lie to keep her safe. I walked into the kitchen and poured a glass of water. Then I heard it, the faint crunch of glass under a boot. It came from the living room. I froze. I didn't reach for the gun in my waistband. If they were already inside, they would have the drop on me. "You're good," a deep, gravelly voice said from the shadows. "Taking out Ian from 1,000 yards? That's not cartel. That's military." Ryder stepped into the light of the hallway. He was holding a suppressed pistol. He was huge, filling the frame of the door. "Dominic thinks it's the Mexicans," Ryder grunted. "But I know better. I saw your file, Grant. SEAL Team 4. Sniper. Breacher." He raised the gun, aiming it at my chest. "You should have stayed retired, old man." Ryder stood 10 feet away, the suppressor on his pistol looking like a black finger pointing straight at my heart. He was grinning. It was the arrogant grin of a man who thought size and a badge made him invincible. "Put the glass down," Ryder commanded. Slowly, I held the heavy crystal tumbler of water in my right hand. My brain was processing tactical solutions at light speed. Distance, 10 feet. Weapon, suppressed Glock 17. Adversary, 6 feet 4 inches, 250 pounds. Heavy muscle but slow. My status, unarmed in hand. Pistol and waistband, 2.5-second draw time. Too slow. "You're making a mistake, Ryder," I said calmly. I didn't put the glass down. I tightened my grip on it. "Dominic doesn't know you're here, does he?" Ryder's grin faltered for a microsecond. "Dominic is losing his nerve. He let you walk away from the cemetery. He let Ian get popped. I'm cleaning up the mess. Once you're dead, I take the credit. I run the crew." "Greed," I said softly. "It always kills the wolf. Say goodnight, SEAL." Ryder tightened his finger on the trigger. I didn't freeze. I exploded. I hurled the heavy glass tumbler with the force of a fastball pitcher. It wasn't aimed at his chest. It was aimed at his face. Ryder flinched, jerking his head to the left as the glass shattered against his cheekbone, spraying water and shards into his eyes. Bang! The gun went off, but the flinch pulled his aim wide. The bullet buried itself in the drywall behind me. I closed the 10-foot gap before the casing hit the floor. I slammed into him like a freight train. My shoulder drove into his solar plexus, knocking the wind out of him. We crashed backward into the hallway wall, shaking the framed photos of Kyle. Ryder was strong, immensely strong. He clubbed me on the back of the neck with the pistol, sending a shockwave of pain down my spine. My knees buckled, but I didn't let go. I grabbed his gun hand, twisting the wrist outward. "Drop it," I roared, driving my knee into his groin. Ryder grunted, a guttural sound of rage. He didn't drop the gun. Instead, he used his massive weight to throw me off. I slid across the hardwood floor, crashing into the kitchen island. Ryder recovered fast. He raised the gun again, blood streaming down his face from the glass cut. I was on the floor. No time to stand. My hand brushed against the dishwasher door. I grabbed the handle of a heavy cast-iron skillet sitting on the drying rack. As Ryder stepped into the kitchen to finish me, I swung the skillet upward with every ounce of rotation I had in my hips. Clang! The iron connected with his wrist. The bone snapped with a sickening crunch. The gun flew out of his hand and skittered under the refrigerator. Ryder screamed, clutching his broken wrist. But he wasn't done. He charged me, leading with his good shoulder. He tackled me into the cabinets. Glass shattered. Plates fell. We were wrestling in a pile of debris. This wasn't a tactical takedown anymore. It was a brawl. He got his hands around my throat. His thumbs dug into my windpipe. His eyes were wild, bloodshot. He was trying to crush my larynx. I couldn't breathe. Black spots danced in my vision. I couldn't reach my gun in my waistband. He was sitting on my hips, pinning me down. My hands scrabbled across the floor. I felt something cold. A shard of the broken water glass. It was 6 inches long, jagged, and sharp as a razor. I gripped it. I looked Ryder in the eyes. I wanted him to see it. I drove the shard into the side of his neck. Ryder gasped. His grip on my throat loosened instantly. He reached up to his neck, his eyes going wide with shock. He tried to speak, but only a wet gurgle came out. I pushed him off me. He rolled onto his back, kicking his heels against the floor as the life drained out of him. It took 10 seconds. Then he was still. I lay there on the kitchen floor, gasping for air, rubbing my bruised throat. My house was a wreck. There was blood on the floor. There was a dead cop in my kitchen. I stood up slowly. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the cold logic of the mission. I couldn't call the police. Ryder's death would be spun as a hero officer killed while investigating a suspect. I had to make him disappear. I checked his pockets. I found his car keys and his phone. I unlocked his phone using his thumbprint before the body went cold. I opened his text messages. There was a thread with Dominic. Ryder, going to check on a lead. Be back in an hour. Dominic didn't know he was here. Good. I typed a new message to Dominic from Ryder's phone. The heat is too much. Ian is dead. You're next. I took the reserve cash and I'm gone. Don't look for me. I hit send. Then I smashed the phone and threw it into the microwave, frying the chip. Now for the body. I dragged Ryder out the back door to his car. It was heavy work, but I managed to stuff him into the trunk. I went back inside and spent the next hour scrubbing. Bleach. Peroxide. I dug the bullet out of the wall and patched the hole. I drove Ryder's car to the airport, 40 minutes away. I parked it in the long-term parking garage, level 4, in a dark corner. I left the car unlocked. Keys in the ignition. In a city like this, the car would be stolen by morning. The thieves would dump the body somewhere miles away, and by the time the cops found it, the trail would be cold. They would think Ryder fled and got killed in a robbery. I took a cab back to within a mile of my house and walked the rest of the way through the woods. When I got back inside, the house was silent. It smelled of bleach and lemon. I sat on the couch and looked at my wall of targets. Dominic. Ryder. Crossed out. Ian. Crossed out. Evan. Crossed out. Only 2 names remained. Dominic. Julian, the suit/the lawyer. And the invisible man, the judge. I had cut off the arms and legs of the beast. Now, it was time to go for the head. I remembered the conversation at the cabin. The judge wants the full $50,000 by Friday. Tomorrow was Friday. Dominic would be desperate. He had no men left. He had no money, since he thought Ryder stole it. He was cornered, and a cornered animal runs to its master. I was going to follow him. Friday morning. The deadline. Dominic looked like a dead man walking. I watched him through the scope of my binoculars from a parking garage across the street from the city courthouse. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. His uniform was disheveled. He was pacing by his patrol car, checking his watch every 30 seconds. He was broke. He thought Ryder had stolen the reserve cash and fled the country. He thought Ian was a rat. He thought Evan was a junkie. He was the last soldier standing in an army that had evaporated in less than a week. At 0900 hours, he walked into the courthouse. I didn't follow him through the front door. Too many metal detectors. Too many cameras. Instead, I went around the back, to the judge's private entrance. I knew the layout. Carl had done an internship here 2 years ago for his civics class. He used to tell me how the judges had their own keyed elevator. I waited by the gate. When a delivery van for the cafeteria pulled out, I slipped in through the closing gap. I moved through the service corridors, blending in with the maintenance staff. Wearing a gray jumpsuit I kept in my truck for recon work. I made my way to the third floor. Chambers of Judge Oliver. Judge Oliver was a pillar of the community. He was the man who signed the warrants. He was the man who sentenced drug dealers to life in prison. And he was the man demanding $50,000 from a dirty cop. I found a utility closet down the hall from Oliver's office. I cracked the door just enough to see. 10 minutes later, Dominic came out. He looked worse than when he went in. He was sweating. He was shaking his head. "I'll handle it, Your Honor," Dominic stammered to the man standing in the doorway. "I just need 48 hours. I'll get the money." "You have 24, Dominic," Judge Oliver said. I got a good look at him. Oliver was in his 60s, silver hair, expensive suit, holding a pair of reading glasses. He looked like a grandfather. He sounded like a shark. "And Dominic?" Oliver added, his voice dropping low, but still audible in the quiet hallway. "The father, Grant. He's becoming a nuisance. If he keeps digging, he'll find the cracks. Deal with him. Tonight." "Yes, sir," Dominic said. Dominic walked away, defeated and desperate. I waited until the hallway was clear. I could have left. I had the confirmation. Oliver was the head of the snake. But I needed to know one more thing. I needed to know if there was any part of the system left that was worth saving. I walked down the hall and pushed open the heavy oak door to the judge's chambers. Oliver was sitting at his desk, pouring a drink. He looked up, annoyed. "I told you, Dominic, get out of..." He stopped. He realized I wasn't Dominic. "Judge Oliver," I said, closing the door behind me and locking it. "Who are you?" He stood up, his hand drifting toward a panic button under his desk. "Don't," I warned. "I'm the father. The nuisance." Oliver froze. He recognized the name. He slowly sat back down, putting on a mask of calm. "Mr. Grant, this is highly irregular. You can't just barge into a judge's chambers." "My son was murdered," I said, walking closer. I placed a flash drive on his desk. It was a copy of Evan's confession, minus the video, just the audio. I have a recording of Officer Evan Miller admitting that he, Dominic, and the others executed my son and planted the drugs. He admits they pay you for protection. Oliver looked at the flash drive. He didn't look scared. He looked bored. "That's a serious accusation," he said. "It's evidence," I countered. "It clears my son's name. It sends Dominic to prison. And it implicates you." Oliver picked up the drive. He turned it over in his fingers. Then, he did something that chilled me more than any gunfight. He dropped the flash drive into his glass of scotch. He swirled the liquid, watching the electronics drown. "What evidence?" Oliver asked, smiling. "I don't see any evidence. I see a grieving, unstable father who broke into my office to threaten a public official." "You're the law," I said, my voice quiet. "You're supposed to be the justice." "I am the law," Oliver corrected me. "I run this city, Mr. Grant. The police answer to me. The DA answers to me. Do you really think a recording of a dead junkie cop is going to bring me down? I'll have that tape ruled inadmissible before you can even file the paperwork." He took a sip of the scotch, right from the glass with the drive in it. "Here is what is going to happen," Oliver said, leaning forward. "You are going to go home. You are going to stop asking questions. Because if you don't, I will sign a warrant for your arrest. I'll have them find heroin in your house. Or maybe your wife's car. Dominic is desperate, Mr. Grant. He'll do anything I tell him to do." He threatened Eliza. That was the moment the last thread of civilization snapped inside me. I realized there was no courtroom that could fix this. There was no internal affairs investigation that could touch him. The rot went from the street corner all the way to the gavel. "You're right," I said. "The law can't touch you. I'm glad we understand each other." Oliver smirked. "Now get out before I call security." I looked at him one last time. I memorized the layout of his office. I memorized the view from his window, the abandoned shipyard in the distance. "I'm not going to arrest you, Oliver," I said. "And I'm not going to sue you." "Then what are you going to do?" he laughed. "I'm going to introduce you to the only justice you understand." I turned and walked out. As I left the courthouse, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The mission parameters had shifted. It was no longer a rescue mission for my son's reputation. It was a scorched earth operation. I pulled out my phone. I needed to bring them all together. Dominic, Julian, the lawyer, and Judge Oliver. I needed a kill box. I sent a text to Dominic, using the spoofed number again. But this time, I didn't pretend to be Ian. I didn't pretend to be Ryder. I sent it as myself. Sender, Grant, I have the full recording. I have the ledger. I know about the judge. Meet me at the shipyard tonight at midnight. Alone. Or I upload everything to the FBI, the news, and the cartel. Then I send a message to the judge's private number, which I had spotted on a sticky note on his desk. Sender, unknown, Dominic is flipping. He's meeting Grant at the shipyard tonight to hand over the evidence against you in exchange for immunity. He's selling you out. I was betting on their paranoia. Dominic would come to kill me and destroy the evidence. The judge would come, or send Julian, to ensure Dominic didn't talk. They would all converge on the one place where no one could hear them scream. The shipyard. My son used to love watching the boats there. It was fitting. I drove home and went to the basement. I packed the heavy gear, the night vision, the smoke grenades, the suppressor for the P-226. I wasn't a father anymore. I wasn't a husband. Tonight, I was a SEAL, and I was going to war. Midnight. The abandoned shipyard was a graveyard of rusting steel and forgotten machinery. The fog rolled in off the water, thick and smelling of salt and diesel. It was the perfect kill box. I was perched 40 feet up on the catwalk of a decommissioned crane. I was wearing thermal goggles. Below me, the main loading dock was illuminated by a single, flickering halogen floodlight I had rigged earlier. I checked my gear. My P-226 was suppressed. I had 3 smoke grenades and a combat knife. I wasn't here to negotiate. I was here to close the account. At 11:55 p.m., headlights cut through the fog. Dominic's patrol car rolled onto the concrete slab. He got out, his hand hovering over his holster. He looked frantic, his head snapping left and right, searching the shadows. He was shouting my name, but the wind swallowed his voice. Grant, come out. I have the deal. I have the confession. He was lying. He didn't have anything. He was just trying to draw me out so he could put a bullet in me. 2 minutes later, a black Lincoln Town car glided into the light. This was the variable. The back door opened, and Julian stepped out. He was holding a briefcase. But then, the other door opened. Judge Oliver stepped out. He was wearing a trench coat, looking out of place among the industrial decay. But his arrogance was visible even from 40 feet up. He had come to ensure the job was done. He didn't trust Dominic. I smiled in the darkness. They were all here. The hand, the mouth, and the brain. Where is he? Oliver demanded, his voice echoing off the shipping containers. He's not here yet, Dominic shouted, backing away. But he's coming. He said midnight. You look nervous, Sergeant, Julian sneered, adjusting his glasses. Are you planning to give him the evidence? Or are you planning to kill him? I'm going to end it. Dominic yelled. Just give me the money so I can leave. There is no money, Dominic. Oliver said coldly. You're a liability. You really thought we were going to let you run. Dominic froze. He realized the trap wasn't just for me. It was for him too. You set me up. Dominic reached for his gun. Click. I hit the remote switch in my hand. The single halogen floodlight died. The shipyard plunged into total, suffocating darkness. What the hell? Julian screamed. I dropped the first smoke grenade from the catwalk. It hissed as it hit the concrete, spewing a thick, gray cloud that mixed with the fog. I rappelled down the cable, landing silently on top of a shipping container 10 feet above them. Dominic, put the gun down. Oliver shouted in the dark. Bang, bang. Dominic fired blindly. The muzzle flashes lit up the smoke like strobe lights. I moved. I dropped to the ground behind Julian. He was spinning around, holding his briefcase like a shield. I didn't waste a bullet. I grabbed him by the back of his suit jacket and yanked him into the gap between two containers. No, please. I silenced him with a swift strike to the temple with the butt of my pistol. He crumpled. I zip-tied his hands and feet in seconds. He was the witness. I needed him alive for the very end. Julian. Oliver called out. Julian. He's gone, I whispered. My voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Grant. Dominic screamed. He was hyperventilating. Show yourself. Face me like a man. You didn't face my son like a man, I replied from the shadows. You handcuffed him. You executed him. I threw a rock to the left. Dominic spun and fired 3 rounds at the noise. Bang, bang, bang. He was emptying his magazine. He was terrified. I circled right. I could see him clearly through my thermal goggles, a glowing orange figure trembling in the cold blue dark. I stepped out of the smoke, 10 feet behind him. Dominic. He spun around, raising his weapon, but I was already moving. I fired 1 round. Uffed. The bullet went through his right shoulder, shattering the joint. Dominic screamed and dropped his gun. He fell to his knees, clutching his arm. I kicked the gun away into the darkness. My arm. You broke my arm, he wailed. I stood over him. Judge Oliver was standing frozen near the car, unable to see anything, listening to his enforcer fall apart. Grant. Oliver's voice was shaking now. Listen to me. We can make a deal. I have money. Accounts in the Caymans. Millions. I ignored the judge. I looked down at Dominic. Look at me. I commanded. Dominic looked up. He was crying. The tough sergeant, the wolf of the 4th precinct, was just a coward in a dirty uniform. Did he beg? I asked softly. Did Kyle beg you not to shoot? I'm sorry, Dominic sobbed. I'm sorry, Grant. It was a mistake. We just wanted the money. Please. I have kids. So did I said. I didn't give him a speech. I didn't give him a warrior's death. I raised the P-226. For Kyle. Uffed. Dominic fell backward. Silence returned to the shipyard. I turned my head slowly toward the Lincoln. Judge Oliver was fumbling with the door handle, trying to get back into his car. He was panting, terrified. I walked toward him. I didn't rush. I let my boots crunch on the gravel so he could hear me coming. He managed to open the door, but before he could climb in, I slammed it shut. He spun around, pressing his back against the black metal of the car. I took off my night vision goggles. The moon had broken through the clouds, casting a pale, ghostly light on us. Mr. Grant, Oliver gasped. Think about this. I am a federal judge. If you kill me, they will hunt you to the ends of the earth. They're already hunting me, I said. And you're not a judge tonight. You're just a man who ordered the death of a boy to protect his bank account. I holstered my gun. Oliver looked confused. He thought I was sparing him. I'm not going to shoot you, Oliver, I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the drug bag, the one with the rest of the heroin I had taken from Evan's stash. You built your empire on this, I said, tossing the bag at his feet. You ruined families with this. You killed my son for this. What? What are you doing? Oliver stammered. I stepped closer, invading his space. Julian is alive. I pointed to the shadows. And he's going to talk. He's going to tell the FBI everything to save his own skin. The money laundering. The hits. The corruption. I'll deny it, Oliver said, trying to regain his composure. It's his word against mine. No, I said. Because you won't be here to defend yourself. I grabbed Oliver by the lapels of his expensive trench coat. He tried to fight, but he was an old man who had lived a soft life. I was iron and scar tissue. I dragged him toward the edge of the dock. Below us, the dark water of the harbor churned against the pilings. This ends now, I said. Judge Oliver clawed at my hands, his fingernails digging into my gloves. For a man who wielded the power of life and death from a comfortable leather chair, he had no fight in him when staring into the abyss. Grant, don't, he shrieked, the salt spray hitting his face. I can give you names. I can give you the cartel. Just let me pull you up. I don't want the cartel, I said, my voice steady against the howling wind. I want the father you took from his son. I want the future you stole from my boy. I looked into his eyes. I wanted to see if there was any remorse, any soul. There was nothing but fear and greed. You are the disease, I whispered, and I am the cure. I let go. Oliver screamed as he fell backward into the dark, churning water below. There was a splash, swallowed instantly by the black waves. The current was strong tonight. It would pull him under the docks, trapping him beneath the pilings. By the time they found him, the fish would have done their work. I stepped back from the edge. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel happy. I felt a heavy, cold silence where the rage used to be. The fire was out. I walked back to the shipping containers. Julian was still there, bound and gagged, eyes wide with terror. He had heard the scream. He knew the judge was gone. I knelt beside him. I took the flash drive, the one containing the evidence of the drug ring and the money laundering. I also took a second drive, the copy of Project Blue that incriminated Nathaniel, the corrupt internal affairs agent who had sent my son to his death. I tucked both drives into Julian's jacket pocket. I pulled down his gag. Please, Julian whimpered. I won't talk. I swear. Oh, you will talk, I said. You're going to talk to everyone. Because if you don't, the cartel will think you stole their money. The only place you're safe is inside a federal prison. I stood up and dialed 911 on a burner phone. Gunfire at the shipyard, I said calmly. Officer down. Massive drug seizure. Ask for the FBI director. Tell him to check Julian's pocket. I crushed the phone and dropped it. I vanished into the fog before the first siren wailed in the distance. The headlines didn't stop for weeks. It was the biggest scandal in the city's history. The body of Sergeant Dominic was found at the shipyard. The body of Judge Oliver washed up 3 days later. Julian, the lawyer, sang like a bird to avoid the death penalty. He gave up everyone. He gave up the corrupt coroner. He gave up the payroll clerks. And he gave up Nathaniel. I watched it from a small diner 2 towns over. The TV showed Nathaniel being led out of his office in handcuffs, his face hidden by a jacket. He was charged with conspiracy, racketeering, and accessory to murder. The brother I once trusted in war would spend the rest of his life in a concrete box. But the most important news came at the end of the broadcast. The police department has issued a formal apology to the family of Kyle Grant. New evidence confirms that Kyle was not involved in drug trafficking, but was, in fact, an innocent victim who attempted to expose corruption. All charges against him have been posthumously dropped. I turned off the TV. I paid my bill and walked out. I didn't go back to the empty house. I couldn't live there anymore. Too many ghosts in the hallway. Too much blood in the kitchen. I drove to the cemetery one last time. The grass was green again. The seasons were changing. Eliza was there. She was kneeling by the headstone, arranging fresh flowers. She looked better. The darkness under her eyes had lifted slightly. She had heard the news. She knew her son was innocent. She knew he died a hero. I didn't walk up to her. I couldn't. I was the one who had brought the violence home. I was the one with blood on my hands. For her to heal, she needed to believe that justice just happened. She didn't need to know her husband was a monster who hunted men in the dark. I watched her from the tree line. I watched her smile, just a little, as she touched Kyle's name on the stone. Goodbye, Elle, I whispered. Goodbye, Kyle. I turned and walked away. I got into my truck and pointed it west. I didn't know where I was going. Maybe the mountains. Maybe the coast. Somewhere quiet. I was a ghost now. A guardian in the shadows. The war for my son was over. But in a world full of wolves, the sheep would always need a sheepdog. And I still had plenty of bite left. Story finished. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I have a question for you that I want you to answer honestly in the comments. If the system failed your family, and you knew who was responsible, would you trust the law to fix it, or would you take matters into your own hands like Grant did? I really want to know your thoughts. Also, please let me know which city or country you are watching from. It is amazing to see our community growing all over the world. If you enjoyed this story, please gently hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I put a lot of heart into these scripts, and your support means the world to me. And one last thing, tell me in the comments, what kind of story do you want next? Do you want more military revenge, or should we try a psychological thriller about a cheating spouse, or maybe a bodyguard protecting a wealthy family? Let me know what you crave, and I will write it for you. Until next time, stay safe.